Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today on CFCU Community Credit Union's Student Loan Tips to Cover Higher Education Costs webinar. Again, my name is Suzanne Wilkins, Director of Strategic Partners for Student Choice, which is a company that helps your credit union offer higher ed education as well as options for financing. So we are going to be jumping right in as to why we're here today, right? The reason is college is really, is really expensive, right? Let's just boil it down to that, right? But there are ways to handle the finances surrounding college to minimize your exposure to debt, right? And we know that there is a value in college, even though we see college costs escalating. Again, we can sort of navigate that whole process, but the value, we're still seeing that someone with a bachelor's degree over someone with just a high school diploma makes a lot more money, about $1 million over their career than someone with a high school diploma. So that's why, obviously we feel that it's important to talk about these conversations. But before I jump into the nuts and bolts of it, I would like to take a quick moment to address what's been going on in the student lending industry, right? Navigating through COVID-19 has been very interesting to us as an industry. And your credit union, along with our team at Student Choice, has published a few tips and tricks. If you just follow this link, mycfcu.studentchoice.org, and then navigating college planning during the coronavirus pandemic, you should get a lot of really good tips and tricks to prepare your student for going into the college realm, so to speak, right? It's something that we're still having to deal with, right? Some of the questions as parents that we need to ask ourselves is, what happens if there's an outbreak on campus? Is the vaccine required on campus? What does the virtual community look like that the college is sharing with your student? Now, they should be able to answer those questions now that we've been through a year of it, right? Last fall, everything was up in the air. The transition from on campus to the virtual world was really unique to some of these universities and colleges. And how we prepared was unique. Things as small as noise canceling headphones, because if you're in isolation with a group of maybe 2 or 3 other people in your college dorm and you still have to take classes virtually, maybe it makes sense to do that. So these are the little tips and tricks that we would have to think about, maybe upgrading the camera on your computer. It becomes really important now to make sure that you have the proper tools in the virtual environment. So these are things that we see that we've seen in the industry the past year to year and a half. Also, just want to make sure that any seniors on the call or graduates, right? Just make sure that you have an open line of communication to your financial aid officer of the university. They'll be able to help guide you in how to plan through COVID-19. Again, we still have to talk about it because it still sort of exists. Hopefully we are turning the corner on this, but I just wanted to let you know that you do have some resources out there for you and how to navigate it. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about money, right? Scholarships. So there are 2 different types of scholarships that we need to be aware of. The kind of scholarships that you can get without filling out the FAFSA form, all right, which we should all be aware, the FAFSA form is a free application for federal student aid. It comes out, the beginning of October every year, and people have to fill it out as long as they attend college. It just garners some demographic and some financial information for the schools. There are the types of scholarships that you can get without filling it out, and I call them the private scholarships, and the types of scholarships that you can get with filling out the FAFSA form. Now, those are the federal scholarships. So we're going to talk a little bit about the private scholarships today. And a lot of times parents ask me, when should their students start looking for scholarships? I suggest looking for scholarships at the end of the junior year. That summer is when you should dedicate that time, right? And my next question that I get from parents is, how much time should someone dedicate to getting scholarships, and how much money am I going to get if I do? So those are questions that are a little bit more difficult to answer, but I can share with you some of my experience. I have two daughters that have been through the college system. One recently just graduated last weekend. So I am well aware of, finances and scholarships surrounding higher ed. So when they were going to college, I required them in their junior year to treat it like a part-time job in the summer months. Okay, so I was asking them to look at least an hour to an hour and a half every week. I don't think that's a lot to ask. My oldest one, she got back a decent package by doing that. She got, if I can remember right, between $4,000 and $5,000, right? My youngest one didn't do as much. So we're going to talk about her in a few minutes and where her mindset is, and hopefully, we can learn from both of their scenarios, right? So scholarships, private scholarships can be based on need or merit. It can be awarded for a variety of different reasons, such as if I have purple hair, I could qualify. If I write with my left hand, I could qualify. I mean, there is crazy, man. It just doesn't have to be, sports related or academic related. It can be a variety of different reasons. And the award amounts may vary. Okay, so that's something that you also have to ask when receiving an award. Is it a lump sum scholarship, or is it going to be over the course of 4 years that it's going to be paid out? And something else that you need to be aware of with private scholarships that I wasn't, and something that has been affected by COVID as well. Private scholarships, you have to ask as a parent how the university is going to treat those scholarships. Are they going to take it away from your son or daughter's financial award? Or do they not, consider it when they're looking at the award package? Every school is different. My oldest daughter, she did all that work, and they excluded it from her financial aid package. So that means that they just decreased the amount of funds that they were going to give to her. Some schools now, don't have that qualification, but you can always reach out to your financial aid office of the college that your student is thinking about attending or will attend. The financial aid officers are the unsung heroes, I think, of higher ed. They do a lot of work. They really want to make sure that they treat the students well, and that they give them really good options financially. So I think that a lot of times parents might see that as, a relationship where they're just, there's too much control with the money and all of that. And it really isn't that. These people really dedicate their time and energy to students in a very admirable way, I think. So anyway, just keep that in the back of your pocket. They're a really good resource. So CFCU has a scholarship program, and I think that that's something that always should be put in someone's, back pocket again, so to speak. Please check out their scholarship. They issued over $40,000 in scholarships. That is a tremendous amount of money. And it's another way to just source out these scholarships, right? What I call a ripple effect, right? So check out all your credit unions. If you're a member of a credit union or a couple of credit unions, check those credit unions out. If you are employed, go to your HR department, see if there is scholarship opportunities for your son or daughter there. If they have a part-time job, ask them to do the same. There is, again, going back to the ripple effect, there is a Rotary scholarship in my area that is local, and then it is regional, And then some scholarships can go nationally. So again, just think about different ways to search for scholarships. I think you'll be surprised because there's a lot of money to be had. There's a lot of money out on the table, but we just need to understand how to get them. Now, these are some of the resources to search for scholarships. The only caveat to all of these is that it is on a national level, and it is probably a little bit more difficult to receive an award from these national entities that we trust. However, please, don't get discouraged. We just want to make sure we set the proper expectations on that. Now, one of the things that I do want to call attention to is something that isn't web related. It is an actual phone app, which is called Scholly, Scholly, that little red dog there. You can upload it to your phone. There is a charge. I don't get paid by Scholly at all. We just found it out there. We thought it would be nice to promote it as a tool, as an additional tool. So the student would just answer about 10 basic questions, and input their GPA and their intended major. And what it gets back to the student is all the scholarships that are available in that moment, the deadlines, if they have to fill out an essay. It also gives essay templates on how to write any essays for scholarships and or college, getting into college. So it's a good tool. It's very convenient. My daughter used it. She was able to, while she was waiting for a ride, pull it up on her phone and, see, do her work, so to speak, right? Her part-time job of looking into scholarships. So just a few suggestions there. Now, before I continue on, I want to talk a little bit more about some scholarship tips. So we encourage everyone that when they do fill out an application for a scholarship to follow all instructions. If they're asking you to paper clip an application together instead of stapling it, I want you to follow those instructions. This is how they vet you out, right? If they're asking you to fill it out in red crayon, that's what you should be doing. There was one scholarship out there that I saw. I don't know if it's out there anymore. It was for $30,000. Excuse me, $10,000, and it had 30 pages of instructions, right? So of course, probably your typical 18-year-old would probably roll their eyes and say, gosh, this is too many instructions to fill out. But, it's all in perspective, right? I like to say that if my boss came to me and asked me to fill out a report, 30-page report, that's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to, that's how I make my living. That's how I'm going to get paid at the end of the day. So, it's all in perspective and how much of the work that you want to do. If you're using reference letters, if the scholarship is asking for a reference letter, and you have to find someone, usually it is, a favorite teacher, guidance counselor. It could be a pastor, priest, some civic leader. If you volunteer your time, someone that runs the nonprofit. But make sure that we keep it as easy as possible for those reference letters, because usually people that are chosen are probably chosen by other students, right? And they have a lot of reference letters to write. So if the student can produce what we call a student resume. So the student resume starts from day one of 9th grade all the way through today of all their achievements. And they hand the student resume to the person that they're asking for a reference letter. It just makes that person writing that reference letter, it makes it easier for them, right? They can concentrate on their character and not worry about if Johnny played on the football team or Susie did the track meet or whatever have you. So just another tip that you might use in the future. Please make sure you highlight community involvement and any charity work. That is also important. Include a job history. I have coworkers serving on scholarship committees all the time. And the reason why this is important is they need to understand that if someone has a part-time job, that's going to cut into their time on the extracurricular activity level, right? So they weigh that in their decision-making process, right? So they might not have a lot of extracurricular activities with the school, but they have a part-time job. That makes sense, right? In your essays, please make sure that your student has another set of eyes to look at the essay. Make sure there's no spelling, grammatical errors. Maybe they can reach out to a teacher and get help with that. So that's, again, another reason why you don't want your submission to end up in the trash because of a spelling error, right? And then, beware of scams. Free money shouldn't cost money, right? So there is a company out there that charges a fee, and they guarantee that you'll get a scholarship. However, they don't tell you how much in a scholarship you'll get. So let's say if they're charging a fee of $250 and you get a scholarship of $50, that really doesn't make sense, right? And then finally, I always like to bring this story to the table. I use it in all of my seminars because it blew my mind away in terms of, not just the story, but how I look back on my girls and how they navigated scholarships. So there was, again, one of my colleagues served on a scholarship committee, and this one was a big deal. It was a $40,000 scholarship. And this young man won it. And at the end of the media event announcing that he won, he went to all of the committee members to thank them. And then he wanted to know what got him the scholarship. Was it his GPA? Was it his involvement in the school, part-time, whatever it was? He wanted to know so that he could get more scholarship money in the future. And what they told him blew me away. They said that he was the only one that applied. Now, that in itself is amazing. But then I started thinking about my girls. And my oldest one, like I said, did all of her homework in terms of scholarships. She did her work. And then I would come home to my youngest daughter when it was her time, and I would ask her, okay, how many scholarships did you find? What's going on? And she would invariably say, well, I didn't find any today. I don't qualify. And it's really telling that, a 17-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old might not have, self-confidence when they're looking at these scholarships. They might think that they don't qualify, they're not good enough. So I think that as parents, we have to sort of coach them through that and show them that, hey, what do you have to lose? Go ahead and fill out that scholarship application because you never know. So I thought that was an interesting story to share because, it did make an impact in my personal life when I heard it. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on choosing a college because we're beyond that now for seniors that have probably already graduated. But for those that have other children that are coming up through the system, maybe a junior or sophomore, choosing a college can be really difficult because you have so many questions, right? And it's really important to make sure you feel comfortable with the college that you're sending your child to. So where do you get all these answers? There are a lot of tools out there on the internet. We like the College Navigator tool, and you can find it at nces.ed.gov/college navigator. I think that this is a really good tool because not only does it answer those questions for you, but it also helps you build a 4 or a 5-year budget. So it will project how much this college increases tuition year over year, increases the cost of books year over year, so that you can really, it helps you build a pretty solid budget for your students. So I would encourage you to go out to the College Navigator site. It is really helpful. Now, the cost of an education, which is why we're probably here today, right? It is scary. And I really don't mean to freak you out about this, but I do want to talk about this slide a little bit more in detail, especially the second bar and the fourth bar. The second bar represents a public 4-year in-state on-campus experience for a student. The fourth bar projects out the private nonprofit. Okay, so you can see that public 4-year comes in at 26,800, $20. The private comes in at $54,880. It's a lot, right? These are national averages. And because we live in the Northeast and we have availability to a lot of wonderful universities and colleges, the actual cost is more, unfortunately. Public four-year schools could go as high as about $31,000 a year. And private nonprofit, I've seen them minimally at 61 in this area. I've seen them as high as 72. I live in New Hampshire, and I know of one of the Ivy League schools. They're pretty expensive, right? So how can we help our our students facing these costs? Well, one way is to approach the public versus private space, right? So think of it this way: the public four-year school system is dependent on funds from the Department of Education, the federal government, right? So if there are cuts in the spending for education, the public sector is going to feel it. Okay, so they're going to feel it, and then they're going to start increasing tuition, right? The private nonprofits don't depend on the Department of Education. They might depend on alumni or other activities to bring in the money. Okay, so their pockets tend to be deeper. And I encourage students to at least apply to one private school and obviously, apply to public schools to see what their financial aid package would be. Because in the case of my daughters, I was blown away. Actually, the package that they received from their private schools was actually better than the public school. So they decided to go to the private. Now, the caveat with that is that the private schools, it's great to have a great financial aid package, but the question to ask is, how much do they increase their tuition year over year? Okay, so that could be problematic. So you need to make sure that you investigate that area. Now, the other reason why I'm bringing this slide to light is that on the bars, you can see that there is a dark blue area. That is tuition and fees. Those are set in stone, basically, for college. Anything beyond that blue area, room and board, food, books, those are the flexible costs. That's where we can make a difference in our budgeting. So every little small decision will eventually add up and make a larger impact at the end of the 4 years. That's what I like to coach everyone to remember. Yes, it might be small and not a big deal on this end, but over time, it can make a difference. And this is where we're going to be talking about and breaking down the award letter and understanding the award letter. So before we do that, I had mentioned the FAFSA form earlier, and this is the website. Any other website you might be charged for, so make sure you go to this website. Again, I'm not going to focus too much on that right now because we're beyond that, but by completing the FAFSA form, it opens you up to be eligible for scholarships and grants, federal work study, federal direct loans, Perkins loans, the direct plus loans for parents, and any additional loans such as institutional loans given directly by the university. So those are the types of financial aid that you could be eligible for. Now, the next question that I hear from parents is, sometimes they don't want to fill out the FAFSA form because they're not going to qualify for it. They know that they're not going to qualify for anything based on their income. And I would still encourage those people to complete the FAFSA form because, yeah, they might not be able to qualify for any federal aid, but the school uses that FAFSA form to come up with their own award letter, their own financial aid package, right? So I encourage people to always fill out the FAFSA form, even though it's not mandatory. And again, the FAFSA form opens up every year at October 1st. I recommend that you do it online and not the mail, because the quicker you can get this done, the better off you'll be, because federal aid is first come, first serve. So you always want to fill out your FAFSA form as soon as possible. And again, it's a free form that shouldn't be too hard to complete. So let's talk a little bit about where your seniors are now, right? So they've completed the FAFSA and the application for college. They probably already got in. They're getting ready to go away in the fall. But for those parents that have juniors on the call, I just want to, in a nutshell, give you this view. So you complete your FAFSA in the fall. You complete your application for college. And then hopefully you get an acceptance letter in January, right? Generally. And then you in March, I would say from March 15th to April 15th-ish, depending on the college, they'll grant you a financial aid package. Okay. And in that financial aid package, you're going to see the cost of attendance minus any financial aid. And then you get this unmet need that we all have to deal with, right? And, just so that anytime you fill out a FAFSA form, this is sent to the school of the student's choice. They can list up to 10 colleges to share the financial information with. And what it does is it gives the college expected family contribution, right? You also get that back to the student in what's called a SAR report, a student aid report. So the student can see what the Department of Education has allocated for the expected family contribution, the EFC. And then the school gets their what's called an ISA report, which is basically the same thing as a SAR report. Now, the student will always get financial information back to them. The parent will not. So you ask the student to search their email every year for financial aid packages if they have any questions. Or if they don't receive a financial aid package, they can always go to their financial aid officer of the university that they want to attend. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the expected family contribution. That's a little bit unnerving when you first see it as a parent, because that's something that you think you're going to have to pony up and pay. Like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with $40,000. That I can't do that. However, the term expected family contribution is a little bit deceiving, and hopefully they're going to be renaming that soon in the next year or so. But it's basically a baseline for financial aid officers to work their package off of. So not necessarily exactly what you have to pay. It's just, again, a baseline for schools. Now, I put this up not that it's relevant right now, but it will be. And just to make sure that you keep it in the back of your mind for your budgeting. But the FAFSA application hopefully will be much shorter and more user-friendly, so that's a good thing. Who completes the FAFSA application will change for some single parents. So I recommend that if you have any questions, you talk directly to the FAFSA people. There's 800 numbers on the form. You can go to studentaid.ed.gov for additional information. There will be the discount for the multiple children in college will be eliminated. So again, you take that into consideration when you're building your budget. And they're going to change the expected family contribution phrase. It'll be now known as a student aid index. So we're happy with that. So let's go and talk about how much money we're going to need for school and how we navigate this. So for purposes of discussion, I boiled down this award letter to make it easier to read, right? And it should be known that in this country, some award letters issued by some universities can be very confusing. The government issued a white paper on this a few years back on how to write an award letter. It's not mandated, but it's suggested. The problem is only about a third of our universities and schools use this method. The other 2/3 do not. So it makes it a little bit confusing from school to school what you're actually looking at. So in this case, the award letter so the cost of attendance is $20,000 to go to this school. The award letter comes, the total award comes in at $10,000. So you would think, okay, you just take 10,000 from 20 and you have a remaining need of $10,000. Okay, how am I going to finance that, right? But you have to look at a little bit closer to the award letter, because what is that cost of attendance representative of? Is it just tuition and fees, Or is it the whole shebang, so to speak, right? Is it the books? Is it food? Is it room and board? Those are the questions that you have to understand. You have to make sure what the cost of attendance entails. Now, a typical award letter that is well written should tell you what's included in the cost of attendance. Some schools do not share that. So when you're thinking that you only have to pay $20,000 and then it's actually a $30,000 or a $40,000 bill, that becomes problematic, right? So just keep that into account when you're looking at your award letter. Now, award letters also show grants and scholarships, federal work study, and federal loans. So let's talk about the federal loans, and I'm going to dive into it a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. But a lot of 18-year-olds, even though they have to go through like a Credit 101 course if they accept federal loans, sometimes they're a little bit misled. They think award letter, oh, that's free money. They shouldn't, but some do. So we have to understand that these federal loans have to be paid back. And how are they going to be paid back, right? School grants, I would say the only caveat to a school grant, which is basically free money, there is always a stipulation associated with a grant. So what comes to mind is the teaching grant for me through the federal government, up to $4,000. And let's say as an incoming freshman, I want to be a teacher, I get the grant. And then maybe in year 2 or 3, I want to change my major to accounting because I don't want to teach anymore. Well, the government can change those grants into loans. So as long as you understand that and you have a discussion about it as family members, then that's great. You can plan for it. But just wanted to give you that caveat. State scholarships, that's also the equivalent of the private scholarships that I talked about. Don't need to go into detail with that. And then federal work study programs. So federal work study is basically a part-time job for the student based on minimum wage, usually on campus, for expenses. And how you get federal work study is just by answering yes or no on the FAFSA form. Again, first come, first serve. So if someone doesn't see this on their award letter, I encourage them to talk to the financial aid officer because there are so many other jobs on campus that they can work at that might not go through the federal work study program. So the only caveat to this is that, again, just sharing my own personal, stories. My youngest one had federal work study, and at the end of September, I get a phone call from her, and she's like, "Mom, I don't think I can do this work study program. I want to focus on my grades because it was important for her to get a really good GPA because she was going to med school afterwards. So she wanted to dedicate all of her time and energy to that. That's great, fine. Let's have a conversation about that. How are you going to replenish that $2,000? Are you going to work extra hours during your summer months, to save up for that? Again, she pulled in the hours and she was able to save some money. But again, it's a conversation that you have to have. Yes, you can, turn it down. But if your award letter says it's 2,000 and you're saying no to the work study program, you still have to replenish that somehow. So anyway, something to consider. Now, how do we save money on those flexible costs? Again, these are just suggestions on how much money you could save. Those little decisions along the way makes a big impact at the end. So let's talk about rent, which is the equivalent to room and board. So incoming freshmen have their hands tied a lot with these expenses. Most barring COVID, what we just went through, most incoming freshmen have to be on campus. They can't live off campus that first year. But in year 2, 3, and 4, they have other options. They can live off campus, which might be less expensive. They can live with their parents. They can be an RA and have all of those room and board fees removed from their bill. So there are other options there. The only other option that might reduce this expense for incoming freshmen is that instead of rooming with just one other student, they might want a room with 3 or 4, like in a suite. That might bring the cost down. But again, it's an option, and in year 2, 3, and 4, it all changes, right? The options change. The next line item is food expense. So again, incoming freshmen will have cafeteria plan A, let's call it. And that plan can, in my opinion, could feed at least 1.5 to 2 people, depending on your student, right? But in year 2, 3, and 4, you'll have cafeteria plan A, B, C, and D, D being rice, ramen noodles, all of that, right? The only way that I've heard, some creative ways of saving money on that is that freshmen might sell their food credits to someone that wants more food, like maybe a football player or someone else that, wants to supplement what they have. Or some schools do allow credits back off of the bill. So I would, suggest having a conversation again with the financial aid office to see if there's some options there. Now, the other costly expense is books, right? If you buy a new book through the university, average cost of a book can be anywhere from now 250 to up to 350. I've seen them as high as 350. But there are other options that you can you can encourage your student to do, is maybe buy used books. But again, if you're venturing out of the university, the new book system, I would ask the professor of the course that your student is attending to make sure it's okay to buy a used book. Would make sense to buy a used book maybe for technology, right? Or, biology. But it might make sense for English or whatever have you. So please make sure you check with your professors. Now, there is an option where you can rent books through Amazon for $6 a month. I think last I heard. Also, you can download books on an iPad. That's another option. And then finally, there's a more creative option. I always encourage students to set aside a book account, a savings account, right? And I don't care how much they put in it, whether it's $5 a week, $5 a month, just put something in an account and call it your book expense account. And then once you go to class, and I've had a professor confirm that they use this method. Some professors spend their own money and buy 3 to 6 books for semesters. And if a student comes up to them and asks them, is there a way to cut the cost down of the expense on books, they might entertain that conversation and lend them the book. It's always good to have what I call skin in the game. And when you're addressing the professor, and it does take some courage, right, on the student's part, but if they have skin in the game and tell the professor, look, I have an account for books, this is a little bit above my budget, can you help me out here? The conversation is a lot better than just saying, hey, can I get a free book off of you, right? Obviously. So that's just another creative way maybe to save some money in that expense line item. So, and then I'm going to talk about the personal expenses in a minute, but transportation, you really can't move the needle on that. It is what it is. Maybe you bring your bicycle if it's a large campus and you ride your bike, but again, you're not going to save a lot of money on that. Now, personal expenses. I'm going to get on my soapbox here because I think this is where we get in trouble in the student loan industry. And it's something that we really don't talk about with our students as to where the source of funding comes from. So let me give you a scenario on personal expenses. When someone gets a tuition bill, they're using scholarships and grants, right? They're getting private student loans, federal loans, and they put all of this together and they send it to the financial aid officer of the college that they're going to be attending. And then the financial aid officer takes out what they need to satisfy the tuition bill. And for students that especially live off campus, they'll put some money aside in a student account and let the student know, hey, you have an account to pay your rent. So what happens is sometimes that student, obviously pays the rent, but has some money left over and uses it for personal expenses. So For an example, they'll use their debit card that might be attached to the account, or a special card that is attached to their student account. They might go to the local coffee shop and buy a $5 or $6 cup of coffee. And now that they don't even realize that they finance that cup of coffee over 10, 15, 20, 25 years if they have a private student loan. They're not realizing the source of funding, right? And I'm able to speak to this because I was invited to talk at a college of upcoming graduates, and that's one of the conversations that we covered. They were now that they had to, graduation was upon them, and they had to start thinking about paying back the loans. I had several students come up to me saying, gosh, I wish I would have thought about this a little bit more. I wouldn't have bought some clothes, or I wouldn't have spent money on extra food, or whatever they spent their money on, right? They would have put it back on their loan. It's just that, when you're 18 to 21, you're not thinking in that regard, right? You're just thinking of going to school, having a good time. All of this is being paid for by loans, and that's about it, right? So it's worth a conversation to be had in this issue. So I'm going to step off my soapbox now, and then let's take a little bit of more time to talk about award letters. Now, I want to let everyone know that award letters are not written in stone, right? Because don't forget, the financial aid officer is looking at your FAFSA form, and the FAFSA form isn't based on information today. It's based on a couple of years back, right? So a lot has happened the past year. COVID, right? Things could happen, such as divorce or death, a change in income. So they don't know that. So this is when I encourage parents. So when they get their award letter and they're not happy with it because of these life circumstances have happened to them, they should have a conversation with their financial aid officer. Just to, I think that you will be surprised as to the conversation and how much they will try to help you overcome some of these obstacles. And it doesn't have to be as dire as this, right? It could be me having my daughter go to school. I'm a single parent. I'm taking care of my mom, and I have another daughter in school. And that's a lot to handle, but that's something that the financial aid officer wouldn't know. So it's worth having conversations about. Now, another conversation I would have with a financial aid officer is probably right now in the first couple of weeks of June. Go back to them, ask them to consider maybe hopefully additional funds. Because now, now that their school roster is set, like, most students have to make a decision by May 1st where they're going. Well, a lot of these students that were given award packages are declining to go to that school, right? They want to go to another school. So this school has some money that has been designated for, future students to, sitting now aside. So you might want to approach your financial aid officer about that and see if there's additional funds that they can come up with for your student. Again, they're there to help you and make your dream happen for your student. So what does your credit union believe in terms of approaching financial aid? So they want you to take advantage of all the free money, the grants, the scholarships, tuition discounting. And what tuition discounting is that it's something that is offered from the school directly. There is a fee associated with tuition discounting, and it's basically a payment plan, usually about 10 months. And it takes that unmet need and puts it on a payment plan for you so that you don't have to roll it into a student loan. Now, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, my unmet need is $10,000. I can't put that on a payment plan. That's too much. Well, we're not asking you to do that. You could put $1,000 on a payment plan. So remember when I say those little choices along the way make a big difference. So let's say you put $1,000 on a payment plan for 10 months. That's $100. Maybe you pay $50 as a parent and the student pays $50. That's $1,000 less rolled into a student loan. You multiply that by 4 or 5 years, that's $4,000 or $5,000 not written into a student loan. So those are, again, the different ways that you can approach your finances to make a difference. So you want the free money first. You want the cheap money second, the federal direct loans made to the students. You never want to say no to these right now. They are the best game in town. They're fixed rate, they're low rates. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then once you've exhausted your free and your cheap, you have this gap, this unmet need, right? So do you take it from a 529 plan, a savings account? If you have a house, if you have equity in that house, do you do a home equity loan? Do you do a plus loan, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes as well? Or do you tap into the private student loan industry? A lot of, questions around this, right? So I would encourage people to go to their credit union, to talk to their financial planner if they have one at the credit union to navigate all of these questions, or you can talk to a CPA, ask him or her what would be the best way for you to utilize and fund that gap. So just something to think about. Again, a lot to think about here, but these are good options for you. We've already talked about scholarships and grants. I sort of get ahead of myself here. These are the examples of the federal grants. Again, you can always go to studentaid.ed.gov to see more of a detail in these. Federal work study, we already covered that, and tuition payment plans. So let's talk a little bit more about the federal direct loans. So these are loans made by the federal government directly to the student. There is no co-signer on this. There is no underwriting criteria on this. The student just has to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, have their diploma or GED, be enrolled in a program seeking a degree or a certificate, and making satisfactory academic progress. So for those of you that have children that might be sophomore, junior, senior in college, they have to maintain those grades in order to continue to get federal aid, right? So if grades drop, they might pull back on those funds. Males between the ages of 18 and 25 must register with selective service. If there is a drug conviction out there, you probably won't get a federal direct loan, but again, always reach out to the financial aid officer to get some counsel on that. They might be able to help you with other financial opportunities. So this direct loan, there's two types. There's the subsidized and the unsubsidized. The subsidized is awarded to students based on financial need, and the government pays the interest while the student is in school. The interest rate is fixed, so it's not changing at 3.73, plus there is a loan fee of 1.057%. That comes right off the top of the loan, so that means parents have to, pull that money out of their pocket for the loan fee, basically is what that means. But that fixed rate is really low and it's good. It's not moving. The unsubsidized is awarded to all eligible students, and it's not based on need. Okay, the student has to pay the interest, but it can be deferred while the student is in school. Okay, so they don't have to make payments on the loan until 6 months after they graduate, which is called the grace period. Okay, so the interest rate on the unsubsidized is the same at 3.73%, plus a loan fee of 1.057%. This is a term of 10 years. And again, it has a 6-month grace period. The loan limits for incoming freshmen that have subsidized loan is $3,500 the most. And for those that have unsubsidized loan, the most that they can get is $5,500. I've also put credit limits, loan limits on the sophomores, juniors, and seniors so that you can see what you're up against in the future. And also, I wanted to address independent students. A lot of times I get scenarios where the typical 18-year-old says, they're going to college, but their parents aren't going to contribute a dime, so that makes them independent. No, not quite. These are the qualifications of an independent student. They have to be at least one of these to be an independent student. If they're not, they are not considered an independent student. Now, there are times where there are instances where it's very difficult for the student to get the parents involved. If at all. And I encourage those students, again, to talk to the financial aid officers. They're going to be their angels for sure. They'll try to move heaven and earth to make it right for that student. We talked about the options for filling the funding gap. But let's talk a little bit more about what's available for the parents. And this is the Federal Direct Plus loan, which is the parent loan for undergraduate students. So this is a little bit different than the direct loan that your student is going to get. This is made in the parent's name only. The student is not a cosigner, can't be on the loan, and it is credit-based, okay? So if a parent does not qualify for this, it automatically makes the student eligible for more financial aid, and they should talk to their financial aid officer, okay? But on this, the draw of this is that there's no borrowing limit. It's just the cost of attendance less any financial aid. Okay, so that's the draw of this plus loan. But the interest rate is fixed at 6.28%. So, this is where we get a little bit, it's starting to get high here. What do we do? Do we do a private student loan? Do we do a home equity loan? What do we do? And the origination fee is 4.228%. That fee is really high and can be financed into the loan, okay? The term on this is 10 years, and it begins basically immediately from point of disbursement. However, parents can get this deferred while the student is in school. So again, it's an interesting loan to get, something to consider, obviously, when you're looking at financing. So let's talk a little bit about private student loans and how they operate. So we want to make sure that you exhaust all of your free money first, your cheap money second. This should never, private student loans should never replace federal direct loans. And student loans, private student loans, the rates vary by institution. They are not associated with the Department of Education, right? There's absolutely separate from that. So that means that rates and terms and fees are decided on by the institution themselves, whether it's a credit union, a bank, a fintech company. They're all creating their own private student loans. And we typically see no origination fees, but they can impose some origination fees out there, anywhere from 0 to 3%. I've seen a company advertise no origination fees, but a 2% supplemental fee in the small print. So again, we want to make sure that we're cautious of what we're getting into. Is the rate based on prime or LIBOR? So prime, basically, we're probably more familiar with prime rate. It doesn't change very often if it does change. And if it does, it's a big media event, right? You'll hear it on the news. But LIBOR, the London Interbanking Offer Rate, can change multiple times in a day. It's a lot lower than prime rate. Prime rate sits at 3.25. LIBOR, I haven't checked in a while, but the last time I checked, it was like 1.08. Okay. So these are the questions as parents you're going to have to ask. What is the rate based on, prime or LIBOR? And do they add a percentage on top of that, which is called a margin? So prime plus 1%, that 1% would be a margin. So it would be 4.25. The other thing to be aware of as a parent is, do these loans have a floor rate? Okay, so if someone advertises rates as low as 1.99% and their floor rate's 5%, the interest rate on that loan is 5%. Okay, so these are the questions that you should look into. Now, private student loans, their repayment terms can range anywhere from 10 to 25 years. And usually the typical 18-year-old would require a co-borrower because we are underwriting this. There has to be underwriting criteria where we have to meet income requirements, credit score requirements, and other things. And private student loans do offer the option of full deferment, interest-only payments, or you can pay the whole payment while the student is in school. So your credit union, CFCU Community Credit Union solution is phenomenal. They offer a very unique product to fund that gap. So it is a line of credit structure. Okay, so that means that your student only has to apply once for the entire undergraduate career. And not only is it a line of credit, it also has a really cool function. In our industry, it's called the PERLOC function. But what that is that while the student is in school, especially this would probably pertain to juniors and seniors, if they have other private student loans and they want to bring that private student loan into their loan with CFCU, you're able to do that. And that way it avoids dealing with multiple servicers, and you have better rates on your student loan, your private student loan with your credit union, and you're dealing with your credit union, not all these multiple service providers. So it's a really cool feature that your credit union has adopted. And you can borrow up to $75,000 on this line of credit. Now, you don't have to use it all at once. You can apply for it in your freshman year, maybe use it in your sophomore year, if that's what you're looking for. So it is super flexible in how you do it. So you would take draws on it once a year for your funding, your higher ed. Now, this line of credit is only eligible for students that go to a 4-year school that is not for profit, okay? It doesn't, we don't do loans with 2-year community colleges, beauty schools, trade schools. The reason why we do this is, number one, most federal loans can take care of tuition for the 2-year community colleges. But the trade and the beauty schools have a higher rate of default, and we want to protect your credit union's assets by avoiding high default rates, right? So we go to the 4-year school program. Now, your credit union's solution offers rates as low as 1.99. They give you two options, whether it's a variable rate or a fixed rate. So if you're looking at a variable rate, the rate could be as low as 1.99. And if you're looking for a fixed rate, you're looking at 3.99%. So these are extremely competitive scenarios. They also, with their private student loans, they don't have any origination fees or prepayment penalty fees. So you can pay it off whenever. Or you could put lump sum payments on it at any point in time. So that's a really good feature as well. They do offer a 0.25% rate discount with automatic payments, and they offer flexible repayment options. So if you're looking to finance on a variable rate platform, the term would be either 20 or 25 years. If you, and the key here as to which term you're going to fall under is that if your student has a student loan, it graduates with a student loan of $40,000 and under, the term is 20 years. Anything over $40,000 would be 25 years. And the reason why we do this, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, 25 years, that's a long time. We do it to make the payments affordable to those members that come right out of college and trying to find a job, right? They're trying to make sure that they protect their credit, and they can with an affordable payment. Now, what we see in our industry is it's very rarely that someone uses the whole 25-year or the 20-year term. They usually pay it off anywhere between 12 and 14 years. So that's something to also consider. Now, if you're looking at a fixed rate private student loan, there is a 10-year term for that. So it's not as long as the variable rate feature allows. They do offer full deferment while the student is in school, or principal and interest payments, or just interest payments while the student is in school. So it's up to you. And then all private student loans have this feature that I want to explain called graduated repayment. This is offered only once right after graduation. And it's there just to protect credit. If a student has a job coming out of college and can make their payments as scheduled, I encourage them not to take this. Okay, this should only be taken if you're trying to protect your credit. Maybe you're holding down 2 jobs or you can't find a job out of school, then I would look to this option. So what it does is it takes that 20 or that 25-year term, it extends it out 40 years, and then after 2 years of payments, it reverts that loan back to either an 18-year term or 23-year term. Okay, it makes the payments tiny small so that they can afford it. But by doing this, they're accumulating more interest on this. So we want to try to avoid that situation, but it's there just in case you need it. We've covered a lot of ground here. I understand that. There is a lot of information that can be found on your co-branded website with your credit union. So you would just have to go to mycfcu.studentchoice.org to find all of this information and more, right? Again, a lot of information to cover. If you clicked on the Pay for College section, it gives you a wealth of information. And one in particular that I would like to bring to your attention is our college access counselor. This is someone that is on our staff. She is not a salesperson. She is just there to help you navigate all of your questions. So if you have a question on, where to find colleges and how much does a college cost, or is this college right for my student, or how do I finance this, and how much money would I save if I do private versus, federal, what should I do? She is there. You can either email her, or she has her schedule out there where you can schedule an appointment and she will call you a one-on-one session, and it's free to you. It's free to anyone that you know. It's a free service that we offer and we encourage you to use. So I am going to stop right there. I know, again, a lot of information. I'm going to check my chat and see if there are any questions. And no, I don't see anything. I just want to open it up, open up the line to anyone that does have questions I can take. Okay, then. Thank you for attending the session. I appreciate it. Good luck to you and your students during this exciting time. Take care, everyone. Thank you.